For the next 30 days of my life, I'm going to be playing Granblue Fantasy vs Rising as a complete beginner. Now, I'm not exactly what they'd call a good fighting game player, but I've always been the type that like to try and improve at new things, and with this game's first appearance at EVO just past us, I thought it would be a great time to hop into a new game to hone my fighting game skills in. So, without further ado, let's stop wasting your time and hop right into this challenge. Now, where better to start this video off than at the very beginning of the challenge. I came into it not really knowing too much about the Granblue franchise, but treated it just like any other fighter I tried getting into. At first, it was a lot to take in for me, so I'll be spreading out the explanations for mechanics throughout the video. But the first one that jumped out to me was the specials, or as they're referred to here, skill system. Skills can be performed in two ways: your typical motion input, or what the game refers to as a simple input. Both of these methods achieve the same results, though motion inputs have a 10% damage buff in neutral. More importantly though, both of these methods will still put your skill in cooldown, where you'll have to wait a bit for it to come back up. But fortunately for me, I'm not gonna have to worry about this, cause I decided I was gonna pick up 2B as my main. I'd seen a trailer of her back when she was first shown, and basically knew from day one of picking this game up that she'd be my main for the rest of the month. Now looking back at this decision, I still don't know really if it was a good idea to start off by maining 2B, and to explain why, I'll give you a little general overview of the character. I think the best way to classify 2B in terms of an archetype isn't really a rushdown or zoner, but more like an offensive wildcard. She introduces two entirely new mechanics to the game, with her double jump and skill gauge, which throw a lot of rules of thumb out the window. Take for example her double jump, which combined with her unique air stall, gives her some of the best air mobility in the game, allowing you to break your opponent's typical anti-air timings in a way no other character can really do. A good example of this can be seen here on day 11, where there's 3 separate instances back to back where, if I didn't have a double jump, I probably would have gotten punished really bad for what are honestly super random jump-ins. Adding on to the weirdness of the jumps though, instead of your typical cooldowns for skills like other characters, 2B is given a 10 stock skill gauge that she spends using each skill, adding another layer of resource management on top of 2 other ones you've already got to keep track of. 2B can sometimes feel like a character built off of exceptions with how unique her toolkit is, but when used effectively, she has some of the most oppressive offense in the game, with some of that aforementioned air mobility and great set play, but we'll save that for later in the video. Right now we've got a more pressing issue, which is that we haven't exactly set ourselves a goal for this month going forward, so I just came up with a few off the top of my head. Our first goal is gonna have to be hitting S rank. It's the rank where you can actually demote, and from what it seems like, looking at the discussion around it, it's really where the trenches begin in the game. Now, I'm aware that ranks don't really mean all too much in fighting games, so I also decided secondly that I would attend an offline major, where I could actually test myself against the best players in my region. I wasn't really expecting to do good because, let's be honest here, I've only been playing for a month, but this major I thought would be a pretty good gauge of my skill level by the end of the month. Now that I've established my goals, it was time to start actually hopping into the game, where I spent most of my week either playing arcade mode to familiarize myself with the game's mechanics, or in laggy-ass casual matches. Throughout the week, I'd pick up on some pretty important key moves for the time being that would eventually turn into a more fully fleshed out strategy, but that's a discussion for a later part in this video. For now, 2 moves were really my go-tos for the week: neutral medium and heavy, both of which had great range and auto combos that did pretty decent damage, so I'd usually just end up spamming these 2 throughout the week. It was generally pretty fun learning the game and it felt super beginner friendly, but by the end of the week, I obviously knew I couldn't just spend the rest of my month playing bots and laggy ass opponents, so it was time to hop into some actual competitive matches. But before we do, let's skip ahead a bit in time to July 6th, the day of the major. I was headed to Toryuken, Toronto's flagship fighting game major, and I was competing in 2 games in particular, Street Fighter 6 and Granblue. I'd just gotten into the tournament and didn't really have much time for casuals before my SF6 bracket started, but luckily my first round opponent DQ'd and I got in a few games before my next matches. Casuals can be a great warm-up to get into the groove of things, but now it was actually time to start getting serious. Week 2 began my grind through the beginner ranks, a land of mashing, bad spacing, counter hits, and jump-ins. And boy were there a lot of jump-ins. Now, if you aren't too familiar with fighting games, jumping forward to start your offense might not seem like such a bad idea at first. In a lot of 2D fighters, the default mode of defense is your crouching block, since it'll block both mids and lows and only really lose out to overheads such as jump-ins. So, if you want to beat the crouching block, jumping seems like a reasonable option. except for the fact that jumping is very reactable and anti-airs in Granblue often lead to some of the character's most damaging combos. I'd get to use this to my advantage a lot this week since it seemed like my opponents just couldn't stop jumping. Like look here on day 9, I anti-air this Vera in neutral, she knows I can react fast enough, and what does she do? Not 5 seconds later, and she jumps in and gets punished again. 2B's crouching heavy is a great anti-air that covers a huge amount of vertical space, but not much horizontally, so getting down the timing was really important after the reaction. I'd start off this ranked grind in D5 and slowly started making my way up the ranked ladder as the weeks progressed. I was starting to feel more comfortable with my gameplay and also privileged as hell to be on a character with such massive hitboxes on her normals. Seriously, counter hits were basically a freebie in these ranges with hitboxes like these, so spacing was pretty simple and straightforward for me. During this week's ranked matches, I'd also run into a fair amount of AFK players that'd just ready up and then stand there and do nothing. I don't really know what they were doing, so if anyone's got an idea, leave a comment cause I'm sure they're farming something, but that's really besides the point. For the matches that were, actual ranked matches, I found myself a lot of the time trying to basically win the match as quick as possible, going for the max damage conversion I knew off every single opening cause I'm a very impatient player. Little did I know though, that I was absolutely screwing myself over by doing that, cause the most damaging combo I knew at this point was this one, which spends a bravery point on a raging strike every single time, and I absolutely spammed the hell out of this combo. Now, a couple people watching this are already cringing at the thought of it, but if you aren't aware of why this is such a bad combo, let me explain how bravery points work. Each round you'll start off with 3 bravery points, and doing stuff like raging strikes and brave counters will each spend 1 of your 3 BP. Seems pretty simple till you find out that once you go below 2 BP, you start taking extra damage, scaling up to 50% more damage at 0 BP left. I did not know about this, so I spent this whole week just spending all of my BP every match, and it doesn't really help that 2B has some of the worst defensive options in the game. I mean, you have this reversal that spends half of your meter to use, but that's really about it. This combined with the fact that I just really liked mashing out of things made a pretty bad time for me on defense, but fortunately enough for me, I'd still come out of this week ranked up to C2 and eventually found out about the BP thing making you take more damage. I didn't really have a solid general game plan yet though, so I'd made it my goal for the next week and started taking a more critical look at my gameplay. But before we get there, let's check back on how future Frozen T's SF6 bracket is going. Oh, he lost. Well, that sucks. I mean, I'm gonna be real, I didn't really expect to win a single match after just a month of playing the game, but hey, I got pretty close in the second match at least, so it's not like it was completely worthless. Plus, I've still got one more bracket run. But before we get to that, why not consider hitting that subscribe button down below? I mean, nobody else does. And it really helps me make more videos like this, which take a lot of time. But that's enough of the normal YouTuber stuff. Let's get back to the challenge. It was time I started taking the ranked grind more seriously. I'd already had a couple games under my belt, but overall so far, I hadn't really dedicated too much time to this game yet. I was only at C2, so I knew if I even wanted a chance at S, the game plan was gonna have to change. Strap in, cause I'm gonna be condensing a lot of information that I picked up from watching guides, top player footage, or whatever resources I could get my hands on. Alright, so up until this point in the challenge, a lot of my spacing in neutral has been based around my giant heavy attack, which I'm gonna be changing out and replacing with standing medium. It comes out super quick and it lunges forward, covering a deceptive amount of space in front of you. I'll still like stand heavy for stuffing approaches, but for the most part, standing medium is gonna be the move I play around. Obviously, I've got light attacks in case they get close up, and for further ranges, well, you already know that as a 2B player, it is my god-given right to wire from full screen. The last 2 moves I ended up incorporating were 22M, which is a gravity well that works pretty well at making beginner players panic, but besides that, a pretty janky setup tool, and 22L, which is a good choice on Oki since it leaves you +3 on block, which was a much needed addition to my move list, since in Oki situations, my default was really just to swing with stand heavy or walk out. I liked this move so much that I even just started throwing it around on round start just to see what happened a lot of the time. And now that we've finished the planning for the upcoming week, it's time to start jumping into our ranked matches, which I would say were interesting to say the least. Right off the jump from the start of the week, I ranked up to B and started running into a little more friction in ranking up. The adjustments I made definitely made a big difference though, and moves like Wire and Gravity served as strong options in these lower ranks just to get people to take an action they wouldn't normally do in that situation to try and escape ASAP, which was very easy to capitalize off of. I'd also start to learn and pick up on some of these players' habits and become more able to exploit them as the challenge went on. I still ended up winning most of my matches in this rank, but each would either feel like a complete stomp by myself or a super close down to the wire match where I could barely squeak out a win. So after a few days, I'd finally made my way up to A rank, where I thought I'd inevitably have to end this week. Up here the opponents were getting a lot harder, and a lot of them I felt were just straight up better than me, and my cheesy tactics wouldn't really carry over too well, so that's where I planned on ending this week. But this week was different from the last. I knew my goal was just a couple ranks away. Sure, I thought my opponents were better than me, but I never really felt they were as consistent as I was. So I learned their habits, started reacting and anti-airing better, guessed better on Oki, and grinded out a ton of games in the last stretch of the week, and eventually... I ranked up to S rank. Not gonna lie, I definitely didn't think I'd reach S rank already on only week 3, and I kinda felt carried by 2B's kit, but that didn't really change the sense of accomplishment I felt by the end of the week. It was a much shorter grind than I'd anticipated, since I'd gotten to this point with barely 100 matches even played, but that was fine since it left me with one last week to prepare for my first major. Now we've finally reached the last week of the challenge. This week's focus was all about preparing for the tournament. I spent a lot of time in the lab and in casual matches to just experiment around with and get used to incorporating new moves into my arsenal. I learned a couple new combos this week, like this combo in the corner here, and a more damaging anti-air combo, but the most important addition was probably incorporating more poking projectiles like quarter circle forward medium, and the neutral frame trap standing light into heavy. I'd also change up how I ended block strings, since stopping on an ender usually leaves me punishable, and I can't really have that happening to me in match. By the time I knew it, the 30 days was over, and it was time to show up to Toryuken. There was a bit of a break between the Street Fighter and Granblue brackets, so I spent the time wandering around downtown, meeting up with some friends, and watching some of the other games that were being run. But ultimately at 4 PM, I had the Granblue bracket. First round, and my opponent actually DQ'd, just like in my SF6 bracket. But once that was sorted out, I played against the bracket's second seed and got... immediately washed. Like, that one wasn't even close. No big deal though. I didn't really think I stood a chance anyways, and even if I lost, I still had one more match in loser's bracket to go. And in the last best of 3, I lost 2-1. I was kicking ass in game 1 and 2, I just needed one more round to take the win, but I couldn't get it done. I was pretty tired at this point since I hadn't slept for the past like 24 hours, but that's still no excuse for losing in the end. I got predictable, I didn't anti-air enough, I choked when it matters the most, and it costed me the match. Looking back on it now, I don't think I'm too bummed out about the loss. Sure, at the time it sucked and I really felt that last match was super winnable, but matches like that are gonna happen. Things aren't always gonna go your way sometimes, and if you want to get to the point where you can consistently win, it's gonna take a lot more than 1 month's worth of work to get there. I know I'm gonna bounce back after this, cause that's why I started playing fighting games in the first place. To struggle, to go through the tough times, and come out the other side a stronger player. If I'm being honest, I don't know if I'll come back to this game again, cause I got a lot of other games on my plate right now, but I'll definitely remember this one.